Part 1. The Void's Echo Captain. Elena Vasquez stared at the empty space outside her ship's bridge windows. 50 years had passed since humanity's darkest day, and the scars still showed on every face in the fleet. The UES Defiant was a small frigate, barely 300 meters long, but it was one of the few ships humanity could still afford to build. Everything else went to defense, to keeping the alien alliance from pushing deeper into human space. "Captain, we're approaching Sector 77 Alpha," reported Lieutenant Torres from the navigation station. His voice carried the same tired tone they all had these days. Hope was a luxury none of them could afford. Elena nodded and walked to the center of the bridge. At 35, she was young for a captain, but the war had killed or promoted most of the older officers. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes held the hardness that came from watching too many good people die. "Any signs of hegemony activity?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. Just the usual background radiation and some old debris from the mining colonies," answered Ensign Kim from the sensor station. The Hegemony Alliance had been hunting humans for 50 years now. 6 alien species working together to wipe out what they called the human plague. It had started with trade disputes and border conflicts, but it had grown into something much worse. The aliens believed humans were too dangerous to exist. They said humans bred too fast, expanded too quickly, and fought too hard to ever be trusted. Maybe they were right. Elena had seen what humans could do when pushed to the edge. She had seen the orbital bombardments, the colony ships fleeing in the night, the desperate last stands on worlds that no longer had names. "Only numbers and casualty reports. Continue the patrol sweep," Elena ordered. "Command wants us to check every asteroid and piece of space junk in this sector. If the hegemony is planning another push, they might be hiding supply depots out here." The bridge fell into the quiet routine of a long patrol. Elena watched the stars and tried not to think about home. Earth was still free, still fighting, but barely. The outer colonies were gone. The research stations had been evacuated or destroyed. Humanity was down to 12 star systems, and the hegemony controlled everything else in this part of the galaxy. "Captain," Ensign Kim's voice was sharp with surprise. "I'm reading something strange." Elena moved to the sensor station. "What kind of strange?" "It's a quantum signature, but it's not matching anything in our database. It's coming from grid reference 917. Kim's fingers danced over her controls. "Wait, this can't be right. What is it, Ensign?" Kim looked up at Elena with wide eyes. "Captain, the computer says this signature matches the UES Prometheus." The bridge went dead silent. Every officer turned to stare at the sensor station. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. The Prometheus was a name that every human in the fleet knew. It was their greatest achievement and their greatest loss. "That's impossible," Lieutenant Torres said quietly. "The Prometheus was destroyed at Kepler's Gate 50 years ago." Elena knew the story. Everyone did. The UES Prometheus had been humanity's answer to the hegemony threat. A supercarrier over 10 kilometers long, with space for 200,000 crew members and enough firepower to face an entire alien fleet. It had taken 20 years to build and had cost more than some entire star systems. Admiral Marcus Chen had commanded the Prometheus at the Battle of Kepler's Gate. It was supposed to be humanity's great counterattack, the battle that would push the hegemony back and give humanity room to breathe. Instead, it had been a disaster. The aliens had been waiting with 3 times the expected force. The human fleet had been surrounded and destroyed. Most ships had been confirmed destroyed. The Prometheus had simply vanished. No wreckage, no distress signals, no survivors. The military had declared it lost with all hands, and the defeat had broken humanity's spirit for a generation. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensors," Elena ordered. "Check for system malfunctions or interference." "Already did, Captain. All systems are working normally. The signature is definitely there, and it's definitely matching Prometheus-class quantum resonance patterns." Elena stared at the display. The signature was coming from a region of space that the charts marked as empty. No stars, no planets, just the dark between solar systems. But space was never truly empty. There were always particles, radiation, the faint traces of ancient supernovas. "Set course for those coordinates," Elena decided. "Maximum sensor sweep as we approach. If this is some kind of hegemony trick, I want to know about it before we get too close." The Defiant changed course, its engines humming quietly in the darkness. Elena felt her crew's tension like a physical weight. They all knew what this could mean. If the Prometheus had somehow survived, if it was still out there, it could change everything. But 50 years was a long time. Even if the ship existed, the crew would be long dead. As they got closer, the sensors began picking up more details. There was definitely something out there, something big. The quantum signature was getting stronger and it was moving. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive spatial distortion ahead," Kim reported. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. Space itself seems to be twisted." Elena moved to the main display. The image showed a region where the stars seemed to bend and flow like water. Colors that had no names in human language flickered at the edges of the distortion. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Could it be some kind of natural phenomenon?" Torres asked. "No, sir," Kim answered. "The energy patterns are too regular, too controlled. This is definitely artificial." As they watched, something began to emerge from the distortion. At first it was just a shadow, a darkness against the strange lights. Then the shape became clearer. It was a ship, but not like any ship Elena had ever seen. The basic shape was familiar. The long hull, the massive flight decks, the command tower rising from the center. It was definitely the Prometheus. But it was wrong somehow. The hull gleamed with metal that seemed to shift and flow. Strange energy patterns ran along its surface like glowing veins. Weapons that had never been in the original design studded its armor. "My God," Torres whispered. "It's really her." The Prometheus was massive beyond imagination. Elena's frigate could have fit inside one of its secondary hangar bays. As it cleared the spatial distortion, the twisted space behind it began to collapse, folding in on itself until nothing remained but empty darkness. "Captain, we're being scanned," Kim announced. "Multiple sensor sweeps, very sophisticated. Much more advanced than our own technology." Elena felt sweat on her palms. If this was really the Prometheus, then where had it been for 50 years? And what had happened to it to make it look so different? "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the UES Defiant to unknown vessel. Please identify yourself." For a long moment there was only static. Then a voice came through the speakers, old and tired but unmistakably human. "UES Defiant, this is Admiral Marcus Chen of the UES Prometheus. Permission to come aboard, Captain. We have much to discuss." Elena stared at the communications display in shock. Marcus Chen had been declared dead 50 years ago. But his voice was real, his ship was real, and somehow, impossibly, humanity's greatest loss had returned from the void. Part 2. The Prodigal's Return. Admiral. Marcus Chen looked nothing like the man Elena had seen in the history files. The old photographs showed a man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. The person who stepped off the shuttle onto her hangar deck was ancient but not frail. His hair was white as starlight, and his skin had a strange, almost metallic sheen. His eyes glowed with a faint blue light that definitely wasn't human. "Admiral Chen," Elena said, saluting despite her confusion. "Permission to come aboard granted, sir." Chen returned the salute with a sad smile. "Thank you, Captain. It's been a very long time since I've stood on a human ship that wasn't the Prometheus." Elena studied the man who had once been humanity's greatest hero. He wore a uniform that looked familiar but wrong, made from materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. Two other figures had come with him, both showing the same strange changes. Their faces were human, but their eyes held depths that spoke of experiences no human should have had. "Sir, our medical bay is prepared if you or your people need attention," Elena offered. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary. We're quite healthy, just different." Chen gestured to his companions. "This is Commander Sarah Walsh, my Chief Science Officer, and Colonel David Park, Head of Security. They volunteered to come with me for this first contact." Elena led them to her ready room, her mind racing with questions. How had they survived 50 years? Where had they been? And what had happened to make them look so strange? Once the door closed behind them, Chen seemed to age even more. He sat heavily in the offered chair and stared at the small viewport showing the Prometheus in the distance. "Captain, before I explain anything, I need to know the current situation. How bad is it? How much of humanity is left?" Elena felt her heart sink. She had hoped to avoid this conversation, but the Admiral deserved the truth. 12 systems, sir. The hegemony has taken everything else. We estimate total human population at around 8 billion, most of them on Earth and the core colonies. Chen closed his glowing eyes and was quiet for a long moment. When he opened them again, Elena saw pain that ran deeper than any wound. 8 billion, he whispered. When we left, there were over 30 billion humans spread across 47 systems. He looked at Commander Walsh. We failed them, Sarah. Even with everything we learned, we failed them. Sir, Elena said carefully, we need to understand what happened to you. Where has the Prometheus been for 50 years? Chen straightened in his chair, and suddenly Elena could see the admiral he had once been. Captain, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. But I need you to listen with an open mind. Because the fate of not just humanity, but every living thing in this galaxy depends on what we do next, Elena nodded, trying to prepare herself for whatever was coming. When the hegemony ambushed us at Kepler's gate, we were indeed outnumbered and outgunned, but during the battle our quantum drive malfunctioned. Instead of jumping to hyperspace, it tore a hole in reality itself. The Prometheus was pulled into a pocket dimension, a space that exists alongside our universe but follows different rules. Commander Walsh leaned forward. Time moves differently there, Captain. What felt like centuries to us was only 50 years in normal space, and we weren't alone. The dimension we found ourselves in was the final refuge of a species called the Architects, Chen continued. They were an ancient race, far older than any species in our galaxy. And they had faced the same enemy that's coming for us now. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What enemy? The Hegemony Alliance isn't acting on their own, Captain. They're servants, whether they know it or not. There's something else coming. Something that feeds on entire galaxies. The Architects called them the Devourers. They consume everything, planets, stars, entire civilizations. They turn matter itself into energy to fuel their endless hunger. Colonel Park spoke for the first time, his voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. The Architects fought them for millions of years. They won battles, saved star systems, even entire sectors. But in the end, they lost. The Devourers consumed their galaxy and moved on to find new feeding grounds. Our galaxy, Elena said, understanding. Yes. But the Architects didn't give up. They used the last of their power to hide away in that pocket dimension, waiting for someone who might be able to continue their fight. When we arrived damaged and desperate, they saw an opportunity. Chen stood and walked to the viewport. They taught us, Captain. For 300 years of subjective time, they shared their knowledge, their technology, their understanding of the universe. They showed us weapons that could crack planets, shields that could turn starfire into gentle light, ships that could travel between dimensions. But it came with a price. Walsh added softly, the technology changes you. Using it requires a connection to quantum fields that human biology wasn't designed for. We're still human, but we're becoming something more, something that can stand against forces that would destroy entire solar systems. Elena stared at the three transformed humans. How many of your crew are like this? All of them, Chen answered. 200,000 people who chose to sacrifice their humanity to save humanity. We know what we've become, Captain. We know what we've lost. But we also know what's coming. Elena felt the weight of the universe settling on her shoulders. You said the hegemony doesn't know they're serving these devourers. They think they're acting independently. They believe that eliminating humanity will bring peace to the galaxy. They don't understand that they're just clearing the way for something worse. The devourers use local species to weaken potential resistance before they arrive. How long do we have? Chen looked at her with those glowing eyes. Our long-range sensors detected the devourer advance fleet 6 months ago. At their current speed, they'll reach the outer edge of the galaxy in 18 months. Once they begin feeding, it will take them less than a decade to consume everything. Elena sat back in her chair, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. Humanity was down to 12 systems fighting a losing war against 6 alien species, and now there was an even worse threat coming that would destroy everyone. What do you propose we do? She asked. First, we need to convince Earth's leadership to accept our help despite what we've become. Second, we need to stop the war with the hegemony and convince them to join us against the real threat. Third, we need to use the architect technology to build a defense that can actually work. And if Earth's government won't accept your help, if the hegemony won't listen, Chen's expression grew hard. Then we'll do what we must to save what we can. The architect's final lesson was that sometimes, to preserve life, you have to be willing to become something that life might fear. We've already paid that price, Captain. We won't let it be for nothing. Elena looked at the 3 transformed humans and felt a mix of hope and terror. Humanity's greatest heroes had returned, but they had returned as something else. The question now was whether what they had become could save what humanity had been. Outside the viewport, the Prometheus hung in space like a metal constellation, bristling with weapons and technologies that could reshape the galaxy. For the first time in 50 years, humanity had a chance. But Elena wondered if the cost of victory might be too high to bear. Part 3. The Crucible Test. The emergency session of the Human Defense Council had been going for 6 hours, and Elena could see that Admiral Chen was losing his patience. The transformed admiral sat at the briefing table surrounded by Earth's military and political leaders, his glowing eyes fixed on President Harrison. "You're asking us to trust you with the fate of our species," President Harrison said, her voice tight with suspicion. "But you won't even tell us the full extent of these changes you've undergone." "Madam President," Chen replied calmly, "I've explained the situation. The architect technology has enhanced our capabilities, but at the cost of our baseline humanity. We remain loyal to our species and our principles." General Morrison, the head of Earth's defense forces, leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, you and your crew disappeared 50 years ago. You return with impossible technology and claim that humanity faces extinction from forces we can't even see. How do we know this isn't some elaborate trick by the hegemony?" Elena watched Chen's jaw tighten. She had been on Earth for 3 days now, serving as the liaison between the Prometheus and Earth's government. The debates had gone in circles, with politicians afraid to trust their returned heroes and military leaders suspicious of technology they couldn't understand. "General," Chen said, his voice carrying an edge that made the air in the room seem to vibrate, "if this were a hegemony trick, would they really need to be so elaborate? They already have us outnumbered and outgunned. They could finish us any time they choose." "Maybe that's exactly what they want us to think," President Harrison said. Before Chen could respond, Commander Walsh burst into the room. Her usually composed face was tight with urgency. "Admiral, we have a problem. Our deep space sensors are detecting a massive hegemony fleet approaching the Sol system. 600 ships, including 3 planet killers. Estimated arrival in 4 hours." The room erupted in shocked voices. General Morrison was already reaching for his communicator to alert the defense fleet, while President Harrison went pale. "How many ships do we have in the system?" Harrison asked. 43 combat vessels, including the Defiant," Morrison answered. "All we have left of the home fleet." Elena felt her stomach drop. 43 ships against 600. It would be a massacre. Earth's orbital defenses were strong, but not strong enough to stop a fleet that size. "They know," Chen said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him. "They know we've returned, and they're moving to eliminate us before we can change the balance of power." "Can your ship fight that many?" President Harrison asked. Chen stood up, and Elena could see the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. "The Prometheus is powerful, but we're still just one ship. However, we're not going to fight them alone." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "Captain Vasquez, I'm transferring you and your crew to the Prometheus. Your ship will be integrated into our fleet as a command vessel." Chen turned to face the president. "Madam President, I'm invoking emergency protocols. As the ranking military officer with operational assets, I'm taking command of Earth's defense." "You can't do that," Harrison protested. "Yes, I can. Check your own regulations. And right now, arguing about it will get everyone killed." Chen's eyes flared brighter. "Sarah, contact the Prometheus. Full battle preparation. Launch all fighter wings and prepare the Nova Cannon." Elena had never heard of a Nova Cannon, but she didn't like the sound of it. As they rushed to the shuttle bay, she grabbed Chen's arm. "Admiral, what exactly are we flying into?" Chen looked at her with an expression that was part sadness, part determination. "Captain, you're about to see what 50 years of architect technology can do. I just hope the cost doesn't break what's left of our humanity." The journey to the Prometheus took 20 minutes, and Elena spent the time staring out the shuttle window at the massive ship. Up close, it was even more impressive and terrifying. The hull seemed to move and shift like living metal, and energy patterns flowed across its surface in mesmerizing spirals. As they docked, Elena felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the ship itself was aware of her presence. The corridors were wider than she remembered from the original Prometheus designs, and the walls glowed with a soft, organic light. "The ship is partially alive now," Commander Walsh explained as they walked to the bridge. "The architect technology integrated with our systems over the centuries. It responds to our thoughts and emotions." The bridge was magnificent and alien at the same time. The original human design was still there, but it had been enhanced and transformed. Holographic displays showed 3-dimensional star maps, and the captain's chair seemed to be grown from the deck rather than built. "Status report," Chen ordered, as he took his place in the chair. "Hegemony fleet is 2 hours out," reported the tactical officer, a woman whose eyes glowed even brighter than Chen's. "They're maintaining formation. 600 ships is reported, including 3 heavy dreadnoughts and the planet killers. Earth's defense fleet? Moving to intercept, but they're badly outnumbered." "Admiral Torres requests orders," Elena started. "Torres? Miguel Torres? Your brother, I believe," Chen said, glancing at her. "He's done well for himself. Rose to command the defense fleet after Admiral Kim's death 3 years ago." Elena felt a mix of pride and terror. Miguel was about to face impossible odds, and there was nothing she could do to help him. "Open a channel to all Earth ships," Chen ordered. "This is Admiral Chen aboard the UES Prometheus. All vessels are to fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Do not engage the Hegemony fleet until ordered." "Sir," came Miguel's voice over the communication system. "With respect, falling back will give them a free approach to Earth. Trust me, Admiral Torres, we have a plan." Elena watched the tactical display as the Hegemony fleet approached. 600 ships in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. Against them, humanity had 43 vessels and 1 impossible ship, crewed by people who were no longer entirely human. "All stations report ready," the tactical officer announced. "Nova cannon charged and targeted," reported another voice. Chen stood up, and Elena could feel the change in him. The tired, ancient man was gone, replaced by something that radiated power and determination. "Helmsman, take us to intercept course. Full speed." The Prometheus accelerated toward the enemy fleet, and Elena felt her heart racing. They were flying straight into the teeth of the largest Hegemony force ever assembled. "Admiral," she said quietly. "What's the plan?" Chen turned to look at her, his glowing eyes reflecting starlight. "We're going to show them what happens when you threaten Earth, Captain. And we're going to show our own people that some things are worth any sacrifice." The Hegemony fleet began firing when the Prometheus came within range. Thousands of energy beams and missiles converged on the human ship. Elena braced for impact, expecting to die in the next few seconds. Instead, the weapons simply disappeared. Not deflected or absorbed, but erased from existence as if they had never been fired at all. "Quantum negation field is holding," reported the defensive systems officer. "No damage to ship." Elena stared in amazement as the Prometheus flew through the enemy barrage completely unharmed. Around them, space itself seemed to bend and twist, making enemy shots simply cease to exist. "Return fire," Chen ordered. "Show them what we learned in the dark." The Prometheus opened fire with weapons that Elena had never imagined. Beams of pure energy that passed through enemy shields like they weren't there. Missiles that opened tiny black holes on impact. Fighter craft that moved like they were dancing with gravity itself. In minutes, 50 Hegemony ships were destroyed or disabled. The enemy fleet began to break formation. Some ships trying to retreat while others pressed the attack in desperation. "Nova cannon ready," reported the weapons officer. "Target the lead dreadnought," Chen ordered. "Fire." Elena watched in awe and horror as a beam of light erupted from the Prometheus. It wasn't like any weapon she had ever seen. It looked like concentrated starfire, and when it struck the enemy dreadnought, the massive ship simply came apart at the molecular level. The Hegemony fleet broke and ran. But as Elena celebrated humanity's first real victory in 50 years, she noticed something that chilled her blood. The crew of the Prometheus was changing. Their eyes were glowing brighter, their skin taking on more of the metallic sheen. Using the architect technology was transforming them into something else. Something powerful but no longer human. She looked at Admiral Chen and saw the same knowledge in his glowing eyes. They had won the battle, but they were losing themselves. The question was whether they could save humanity before they forgot what humanity meant. Part 4. The Galaxy's Last Stand. The ruins of the Hegemony command station drifted silently in space, its twisted metal hull still glowing from the Prometheus's weapons. Admiral Chen stood in the station's former war room, facing the surviving leaders of the 6 species that had spent 50 years trying to destroy humanity. Elena watched from beside the conference table as the aliens studied holographic displays, showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The images were terrifying. Massive structures the size of star systems moving through space like hungry shadows. Long-range sensors showed that everything in their path simply disappeared, consumed and converted into energy. This cannot be real, hissed Skatar, the serpentine representative of the Keth Collective. Her scales were a deep purple that shifted to black when she was agitated, and right now they were almost midnight dark. You humans created these images to trick us into surrender. Admiral Chen's glowing eyes fixed on the alien leader. His transformation had continued since the battle at Earth, and now his skin had an almost crystalline quality that reflected light in strange patterns. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal space. Chancellor Skatar, 3 days ago, your species controlled 47 star systems. As of this morning, you control 31. The Devourers have consumed 16 entire solar systems in 72 hours. How exactly do you think we accomplished that? The other alien leaders shifted uncomfortably. Elena had studied their files during the journey to this meeting. The Hegemony Alliance represented 6 species that had dominated this region of the galaxy for thousands of years. The bird-like Tachyon hierarchy, the Crystalline Resonance Collective, the militaristic Vanguard Empire, the hive-minded Nexus Swarms, the Aquatic Deep Current Federation, and the Keth Collective. All of them were now facing extinction. The energy signatures match our records of architect encounters, admitted Prism Song of Truth, the representative from the Resonance Collective. The crystalline being's form chimed with musical tones when it moved. Our ancestors fought similar entities 12 million years ago. We thought they were myths. General Krex of the Vanguard Empire slammed a massive fist on the table. The 2-meter-tall warrior's exoskeleton was marked with ritual scars from 100 battles. Myths or not, they die like anything else. My fleets will meet them in open battle. No, Commander Walsh said quietly from her position near the displays. Her transformation had been even more dramatic than Chen's, and now she seemed to shimmer between dimensions when she moved. General, your fleets will be consumed like everything else. The Devourers don't fight wars the way we understand them. They simply eat. Elena stepped forward. As the only unmodified human present, she had become an unofficial translator between the transformed Prometheus crew and both the aliens and Earth's government. What Admiral Chen is proposing, she said, is a complete alliance. All our fleets working together using architect technology to create weapons that can actually hurt these things. And the price? Asked Prime Current Deep Echo from the Federation. The aquatic being's biosuit glowed with bioluminescent patterns that Elena was beginning to recognize as emotional indicators. Right now, they showed deep fear. What do we have to become to use this technology? Chen stood and walked to the main display. With a gesture, he called up an image of the Prometheus crew. Elena felt her breath catch. They barely looked human anymore. Their bodies had taken on an energy-like quality, and their eyes burned with light that seemed to come from other dimensions. This is what we've become, Chen said simply. We're still who we were, but we're also something more. Something that can touch the quantum foundations of reality and reshape them. It's the only way to fight beings that exist partially outside normal space-time. You're asking us to abandon our nature, Skatar said. We're asking you to evolve, Walsh replied. The architects learned that survival sometimes requires becoming something greater than what you started as. They shared that knowledge with us, and we're sharing it with you. Elena watched the alien leaders debate among themselves in their various languages. She understood the fear they were feeling. She had seen what the transformation was doing to the Prometheus crew, had watched friends and colleagues become something that was powerful, but alien. How long do we have? Asked Mind Node Primary from the Nexus Swarms. The insectoid creature's compound eyes reflected the holographic displays like fractured mirrors. 6 months until the main Devourer fleet reaches the core systems, Chen answered. But the advanced scouts are already here. We've lost contact with everything beyond the Kepler cluster. Elena felt a chill. The Kepler cluster included dozens of inhabited systems from multiple species, billions of lives just gone. If we agree to this alliance, General Krex said slowly, who commands the joint fleet? I do, Chen answered without hesitation. The Prometheus is the only ship that currently has full architect technology integration. We'll serve as the flagship while your fleets are modified. Unacceptable, Krex growled. Humans have been our enemies for 50 years. Why should we trust you now? Elena stepped forward again. Because, General, we're the only ones who've actually fought the Devourers and survived. That wasn't entirely true. The Prometheus crew had learned about the Devourers from the architects, not from direct combat. But the modified humans had somehow absorbed combat experiences from the ancient race, memories of battles fought millions of years ago. The transformation process will take time, Walsh explained. We'll need to modify your ship designs, train your crews in the new technologies, and coordinate our defense strategies. But we can start immediately with the ships we have. Prism's song of truth chimed with what Elena had learned was the crystalline equivalent of laughter. You speak of modifying our ships as if it were simple. Some of our vessels are biological constructs that have been growing for centuries. The architect technology adapts, Chen said. It works with biological systems as well as mechanical ones. Better in some cases. Elena watched the negotiations continue for hours. Trust was hard to build when 6 species had been trying to exterminate humanity for half a century. But fear of extinction was a powerful motivator. Finally, Chancellor Skatar spoke for all of them. We agree to this alliance. But if you humans betray us, if this is some elaborate trap, we will make sure you burn with us. Chen nodded solemnly. Chancellor, if we're lying about this threat, there won't be anyone left to burn. The next few weeks were a frantic blur of activity. Elena found herself shuttling between modified alien vessels and human ships, watching as the architect technology was integrated into dozens of different ship designs. The process was fascinating and terrifying to watch. The technology didn't just modify the ships, it changed the crews as well. Elena watched proud Vanguard warriors develop the same glowing eyes as the Prometheus crew. She saw Nexus drones begin to shimmer with interdimensional energy. The Aquatic Federation crews started to move through their ships' water-filled corridors like living currents. But the changes came with a price. Elena noticed that the transformed crews from all species began to act more alike than different. They developed the same calm efficiency, the same distant manner when dealing with unmodified beings. They were becoming something new, something that transcended their original species. The first test of the combined fleet came sooner than expected. A Devourer scout force appeared at the edge of the Proxima system, and the newly modified ships moved to intercept. Elena watched from the Prometheus bridge as the combined fleet engaged the enemy. The Devourers weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were living masses of dark matter that moved through space like predatory fish through water. When they encountered matter, they simply absorbed it, growing larger and stronger. But the modified fleet was different. Their weapons phased through normal space to strike at the quantum foundations of reality. Their shields bent space-time itself to deflect attacks. Fighter craft danced between dimensions, appearing and disappearing like deadly ghosts. The battle was won, but Elena noticed something that worried her. The combined fleet worked together perfectly, almost telepathically. The human, alien, and mixed crews moved as one entity, executing complex maneuvers without apparent communication. They were winning, but they were also losing themselves. Admiral, Elena said to Chen after the battle, how much of us will be left when this is over? Chen looked at her with eyes that now burned like small stars. I don't know, Captain, but I know that without the transformation, nothing of us will be left at all. Elena stared out at the combined fleet and wondered if saving the galaxy was worth the cost they were paying. The beings they were becoming might be powerful enough to stop the Devourers. But would they still care about the lives they were fighting to protect? The main Devourer fleet was still months away, but Elena could already see that the real battle wasn't just about survival. It was about what they would choose to remain, even if they had the power to become gods. Part 5. Defiance Incarnate. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her new command, the modified frigate Defiance Edge, and watched the impossible sight before her. The main Devourer fleet had arrived, and it filled the void between stars like a living shadow. Each ship was the size of a moon, dark structures that seemed to bend light around them. At the center of the formation moved something that defied description, a vessel larger than some star systems, pulsing with energies that made space itself writhe in pain. Quantum analysis confirms it, reported Lieutenant Kim, her voice carrying the same harmonic quality that all the transformed crew members now possessed. That's their queenship, the central consciousness that coordinates all Devourer activities in this galaxy. Elena nodded, trying to keep her expression calm. In the 6 months since the alliance had formed, she had watched her crew undergo the same transformation as everyone else in the combined fleet. Their eyes now glowed with inner light, Their skin had taken on the metallic sheen of living energy, and they moved with the eerie coordination of beings connected by quantum entanglement. She was the only one left unchanged. Admiral Chen had offered her the transformation many times, but she had refused. Someone needed to remember what they had been, what they were fighting to protect. "Status of the combined fleet?" she asked. "All vessels report ready," came the response from her tactical officer. 8,000 modified ships from 7 species, all linked through the quantum network. Admiral Chen requests your presence aboard the Prometheus for final coordination. Elena looked out at the assembled fleet. It was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Ships that had once been built by separate species now shared the same flowing organic design, weapons that channeled the fundamental forces of creation, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The crews had changed even more than their ships. Elena had stopped being able to tell which species someone had originally belonged to. They all moved with the same graceful efficiency, spoke with the same harmonic voices, and looked at unmodified beings with the same distant compassion that gods might show to insects. "Prepare my shuttle," Elena ordered. "It's time to end this." The journey to the Prometheus gave Elena time to think. The Supercarrier had grown during its months of preparation. It was now over 20 kilometers long, its hull rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Docking bays opened in the ship's side like living mouths, and Elena felt the familiar tingle of quantum fields as her shuttle was drawn inside. Admiral Chen was waiting for her in what had once been the main conference room. Now it was something else entirely. A space where reality seemed thin, where Elena could see glimpses of other dimensions through translucent walls. Chen himself was barely recognizable as human. His body seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, and when he moved, Elena could see the quantum equations that governed reality flowing around him like visible mathematics. "Captain," he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Thank you for coming. We need to discuss the final battle plan." Elena looked around the room at the other commanders. General Krex of the Vanguard Empire was now a being of living metal and energy. Chancellor Escotar had become something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They were all there. All the leaders who had once been enemies, now unified by their transformation into something beyond their original species. "The Devourer Queenship is the key," explained Commander Walsh, who had become something that looked like a human-shaped constellation. "Destroy it, and the rest of their fleet will become uncoordinated, but it's protected by quantum shields that exist in 17 different dimensions. We'll need to synchronize our entire fleet," added Prism Song of Truth, the crystalline being now chiming with frequencies that human ears couldn't hear. Every ship firing at exactly the same quantum moment, channeling power through the unified network. Elena studied the tactical displays. "What about the cost? How much power will this require?" The room fell silent. Elena looked from face to face, seeing the same expression on each transformed visage. "Captain," Chen said finally, "to generate enough power to breach the Queen ship's defenses, we'll need to sacrifice our physical forms entirely. We'll have to ascend to pure energy, become beings of living quantum force." Elena felt her heart stop. "You're talking about dying." "Not dying," Walsh corrected gently. "Transcending. We'll still exist, but as something beyond matter and energy. We'll become part of the fundamental forces that govern reality itself." "And then what? You save the galaxy and become gods who can't relate to the people you saved?" Chen moved closer, and Elena could feel the power radiating from him like heat from a star. "Captain, we've been changing since the moment we first used architect technology. This is just the final step in a process that began 50 years ago." Elena looked around the room at beings who had once been her friends, her colleagues, her fellow fighters. They were still the same people in many ways, but they had become something that ordinary humans could never truly understand. "There has to be another way," she said. "There is no other way," came a new voice, and Elena turned to see a figure she didn't recognize. It was tall and graceful, made of what looked like living light with features that suggested it had once been human, but had moved far beyond that limitation. "Who are you?" Elena asked. "I am what Admiral Chen will become," the figure replied. "I am the quantum echo of a choice that has already been made in 1,000 possible futures. In every timeline where the galaxy survives, this transformation is necessary." Elena felt tears on her cheeks. So we win, but we lose everything that made victory matter in the first place? No, the figure said, moving closer. You save everything that matters. Love, hope, the chance for growth and discovery, the beauty of consciousness exploring the universe. You save the possibility for billions of beings to live and learn and become more than they were. Elena looked at Admiral Chen. Is this what you want? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of all the decisions he had made in 50 years of impossible circumstances. Captain, I want to go home to a small house by a lake and read books and watch sunsets. I want to be the man I was before the war, before the transformation, before the weight of saving the galaxy fell on our shoulders. But that man was never strong enough to protect the things he loved. We are. The final battle began 6 hours later. Elena watched from the bridge of her ship as the combined fleet moved toward the Devourer formation. 8,000 vessels moving in perfect synchronization, their crews linked by quantum entanglement into a single vast intelligence. The Devourers responded with weapons that unmade matter at the subatomic level. Reality itself began to break down around the battle zone, with space-time fracturing into impossible geometries. But the Allied fleet pressed forward, their modified ships healing damage as fast as it was inflicted. All ships, prepare for final synchronization, came Admiral Chen's voice across the quantum network. Power levels at maximum, beginning consciousness transfer. Elena watched in awe and horror as the crews of every ship in the fleet began to glow with inner light. They were abandoning their physical forms, transforming into pure energy that flowed through their ship's quantum systems. Elena, came Chen's voice, speaking to her alone through her ship's communication system. Thank you for staying human. Thank you for remembering what we were. Marcus, she whispered, using his first name for the first time in decades. Don't forget us. Never, he replied. We will be the guardians at the edge of forever, but we will always remember the small blue world where we learned what it meant to be human. The fleet fired as one. 8,000 ships channeling the combined consciousness of millions of transformed beings, striking at the quantum foundations of the Devourer Queen ship. The enemy vessel's 17-dimensional shields held for a moment, then collapsed under the assault. The Queen ship died in a burst of light that could be seen from neighboring galaxies. Around it, the Devourer fleet suddenly lost coordination, their ships drifting aimlessly as their controlling intelligence was destroyed. But Elena barely noticed the victory. She was watching the Allied fleet transform one final time. The ships themselves were dissolving into pure energy, becoming something that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. Captain, came Lieutenant Kim's voice, and Elena turned to see that her bridge crew was fading like mist in sunlight. The ship's systems are being maintained by the quantum field. You can return to Earth safely. Elena nodded, unable to speak through her tears. In the weeks that followed, the cleanup was surprisingly simple. The Devourer fleet, robbed of central coordination, was easily destroyed by conventional weapons from the surviving unmodified ships. The galaxy was safe, but at a cost that would be felt for generations. Elena returned to Earth to find a universe that was both saved and forever changed. The transformed crews of the Allied fleet had become something new, beings of pure energy that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions. They were still there, still watching, still protecting the galaxy from threats that conventional species couldn't even perceive.